So today for language arts, we'll be reading the last chapter, chapter 22 of Bearstone. And just like all the previous videos, you can either watch the Ed puzzle and answer the questions in the Ed puzzle, or you can read the book by yourself and submit the focus questions by yourself. You don't have to do both. So let's do a little bit of a recap on what we read in chapter 21. So we know that Walter is no longer going to be able to keep the farm up by himself. So Cloyd offered to stay with Walter and care for the farm with him. So starting at the top here on page 150, we'll start reading right where it says it was. So it was the second Saturday in November, and they were repairing the foundation under the house. They started the weekend before. The project wasn't Walter's idea. Cloyd had remembered him worrying about it during the summer and reminded him of it. Walter had to admit it was a bad situation and getting worse. Walls, roof, and it all would start to give before long. Walter still had the cast on his leg, and he knew he couldn't negotiate the basement stairs. Wrapped up in a blanket, he sat in a chair at the top of the landing where he could see the boy down below. He had to content himself with lending know-how and moral support. So basically, Walter is not used to not being able to do stuff around his house. So it's kind of a new thing to have Cloyd around doing all of the house maintenance for Walter. Top of page 151. So Cloyd was mixing concrete. He carried the 100-pound bags of cement downstairs himself, as well as countless buckets of sand and gravel, and now he was making concrete. It was chilly in the basement, but as long as he was working, he was warm enough in his denim jacket. He was happy taking care of the old man. He'd grown so used to wandering alone in the canyons, wandering alone in the school corridors, having his own private world. Now he wasn't alone anymore. Cloyd felt strange. He could do whatever he set his mind to. He was never going to give up. He had a life to live. Maybe it's all you've got, the old man had said. Might as well make the most of it. If he ever had any children, he was going to care about them the way Walter cared. If he ever had a son, he was going to name him Walter. The old man would be dead and buried by then, he realized. It wouldn't matter. He would show them Walter's picture, and one day he would take them up to the meadow of the Pine River. Cloyd checked the batch of concrete he was mixing. It was just about right. More water would have weakened it. He hoped the weather would have given him a few days. The snow from October storm had thawed, leaving the ground unprotected. The old cold air was moving in. He worried that the earth was freezing solid at this very moment. They needed the soil outside that broken wall to have some give in it, so there'd be room for the wall to move over. Cloyd had another reason, too, for hoping the ground would keep for a few days and he could dig in it. Thinking about his secret reason made him feel good. He wished for a snowstorm that would blanket the ground and keep it warm. Maybe they'd get one. After breakfast, he'd seen a thick layer of high clouds advancing from the west and cover the sun. A good storm could be on its way. This time, Walter, he said, the snow would stick and winter would have come to stay. Cloyd poured his concrete into the holes he had dug in the crawl space. Then he troweled the new footers smooth. The work went well as he was pleased. So was the old man. Tomorrow we'll cut those railing ties so they fit between our concrete footers and the good wall. Then we'll build a framework between the two walls and jacket tight. With the railrod ties behind it, you know that'll be a good wall. Ain't gonna give. That other end's gonna have to move out over where it belongs. So it sounds like they're doing a lot of home repairs on Walter's house right now, and that the cold weather is playing a big impact because Cloyd needs to be able to dig, and if the ground's frozen, it's going to be too hard to dig. So we're going to start off right here where it says Cloyd knew. So Cloyd knew the plan by heart. He was pleased that he understood it so well, pleased that he was learning so many new things. When they jacked the framework tight between the two walls, the bulging wood would start to give. Every day when he came home from school, he'd go down to the basement and crank those jack a little more. The crack in the wall would close up. When the wall was straight up and down again, they'd simplify the supports that held it. It was lunchtime, and it was warm in the kitchen with the cook stove fire going. The old man was fixing sandwiches. Walter made up the grocery list, and Cloyd did the shopping in town. Every few days, he'd go to the store during the lunch break at school. He had some friends this year, and sometimes they went with him. The teachers let him keep the groceries in their lounge. They even had a refrigerator for the fresh things. Walter insisted on doing the cooking. Cloyd thought that was fine. The doctor had said Walter needed to do things, only nothing strenuous. On the kitchen table, with Walter's help, Cloyd struggled at writing a letter to his sister and his grandmother. He told them about Walter, how they'd gone into the mountains, that Walter had been hurt, that he was taking care of Walter until he got stronger. He knew Susan James made sure they'd heard all of those things, but he wanted to tell them himself. I like the mountains, but I miss the desert, he wrote. It's getting cold here now. Already it snowed once. I feed the horses in the morning, 2 bales of hay. Pretty soon I will shovel snow off the pond and chop a hole for them to drink. Blue Boy is my favorite. He's strong and he's smart. When I come home, Walter is going to bring Blue Boy too. He's mine to keep. For dessert, they had donuts, the store-bought kind, caked with powdered sugar. The old man broke one of his long-standing rules by suggesting they eat them in the parlor, where unavoidably that powdered sugar fell into the carpets. Blends right in, Walter chuckled. Reminds me of a joke I'll bet you'd like. The trace of a smile crossed Cloyd's face. Oh, he said, anticipating one of the old man's tall tales. The fellow was feeding donuts to his horse. Another fellow asked him what for. The first fellow says, to find out how he'd eat before he'd ask for a cup of coffee. Cloyd flashed with a wide smile, and his round face shone like a sun. The old man was holding his breath. His head bobbled up and down, cheeks puffed out, lips drawn tight. Cloyd began to laugh. Cloyd began to laugh. Walter's breath exploded, and then the old man was laughing too until his eyes turned red. They heard a vehicle pull up inside, and both went to the window to see. A young man was getting out of a white pickup with big red letters on the side. Durango Hardware and Nursery, Walter said. Must be lost. The old man took his jacket from the peg of the mudroom and went outside to see if he could give directions. The driver had taken off his glove on his right hand to turn the page of his order book. Here's your receipt, he said mechanically. He tore out a small yellow page and handed it to the old man. The seedlings are in the back of the truck. Seedlings? Walter protested. All paid for. 22 peach trees. You are Cloyd Atticus, aren't you? The young man asked, reaching in his back pocket. The manager gave me this map. Cloyd stepped up. I'm Cloyd Atticus, he said. I bought them. It was a surprise, he explained, motioning toward the old man with his lips. For an instant, Walter's eyes found Cloyd's. The boy was glowing with pleasure. I had never heard of anybody growing peach trees around here, the driver offered skeptically. Too cold, isn't it? I suppose it is, Walter admitted, winking at Cloyd. But we'll sure give it a try. So what happened at the end of the book there was Cloyd surprised Walter by buying him 23 peach seedlings. Because if we remember back in the beginning or the middle of the book, Cloyd ended up chopping down all of Walter's peach trees. So that was the very end of our first book, Bearstone. We are going to go back and answer these final questions here really quick. So, number 1, why was Cloyd happy to be taking care of the old man? Number 2, why did Cloyd hope the earth wouldn't freeze solid? So, kind of remember what projects they were working on. And then question 3, what did Cloyd get for Walter? So, what were the 23 things he ordered for Walter? They got delivered by the nursery truck. Awesome. So, that is the end of Bearstone. We will be reviewing for our test tomorrow. Then on Thursday, we will be taking our Bearstone test. And on Friday, we'll be starting our final Bearstone project.